I am so honored to have Peggy McIntyre as my guest today on Last Call with Kristin. I met Peggy a couple of months ago. I participated in this amazing summit that she put on with survivors of incest and sexual assault. And I was able to share my story with her and felt so much love and compassion and gratitude after doing that interview that I kept wondering, I want to learn more about Peggy and Peggy's story and what brought her to be willing to put on such a powerful summit. So Peggy, thank you for being with me.
Well, Kristin, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our time together. And as painful as the summit was, well, the summit wasn't painful, but the decision to do it was a painful process. But I just wanted to throw caution to the wind. And I am so glad I did, because I met such wonderful people, you included. And so it has really expanded my tribe, my friendships, and just wonderful people like
I
you.
loved it. I was so honored to be a part of it, but also I felt like I found some tribe there too. And it felt really inclusive because our trauma is something we were taught for a long time not to talk about or to get over.
Right.
And to hold a safe space with these powerful survivors, I just thought, I felt so inspired.
And so did I. And I was so inspired by your story. And our story has some similarities, but we all have our own journey. But there's always similarities, and the coping mechanisms we choose
Yes.
to get through. And so we have some similarities in that.
Well, I would love to hear more about those similarities. I would love to hear about your journey from trauma to triumph.
Well, my journey started, I I'm a twin, a fraternal twin. My sister was born on a Monday. I was born on a Wednesday. My mother died on Friday.
Oh my goodness, Peggy.
And my mother was quite a few years younger than my dad. She was 17 years younger than my dad. So I never knew my mom, but I did know my dad, who I later found out was a womanizer, but all through my life, he was an alcoholic. So he was 47 years old when I was born, and he had no idea how to care for two twins, two young babies, and he married. I have to give you this a little bit of a backstory so you
Oh,
understand.
please do. No, I would love to hear the backstory.
Okay, so shortly after my mother died, he decided to marry a woman who had children, because he wanted a mother for his children. She needed a father for her children. So they decided to marry. And she also was younger. And how it turned out, she moved her family into his house, small 2-bedroom house, but so it was a lot of them, I guess, there. And the way he described it was that she took over, and he felt very disrespected. And I I don't know that for sure, but he got very angry during an argument, and he decided he was going to use a firearm to end it, and he ended up killing her sister.
Oh my God.
So my sister and I, we're about 15, 16, 17 months old, and he ended up going to jail. And so we were kind of a novelty in my family, because my sister and I were twins, and everybody started, well, we want the twins. And so it was between my father's brother and his sister. And so his sister convinced him that we would be better served with her, because she was a blood relative whereas my uncle's wife was not. Although she was a very kind woman, and I know she would have treated us well. But the tiebreaker was that his sister was a blood relative. So at 19 months old, we came to live with her. And I don't have a lot of memories of that, but I do remember it to be a very fun and loving time from the pictures that I see. And my sister and my aunt always dressed us in such cute outfits and things like that. So we were just adorable kids. And so when we were about almost 7, he decided, because I came to Michigan, and because that's where my aunt lived. And so we did kindergarten and first grade in Michigan. So the summer between first and second grade, my dad had gotten with another woman, and he wanted us to return to him. So we did. So shortly after that, I remember sleeping. My sister and I, we shared a bed. And I remember just one night, in the middle of the night, I felt my leg raised in the air, and I felt movement between my legs. And I woke up to see my father fondling me. And then when he realized I was awake, he motioned to me to come to his room. So I went to his room, and that's how the abuse started. And it was relatively frequent. So that's how it started. And then so the woman he was with, it happened to be his best friend's wife. So there was a lot of alcohol involved, a lot of violence in the relationship. So she left, and we were terribly neglected, living with 2 alcoholics. And so when she left, we were even more neglected. And I later found out that we were going to become wards of the state. So he asked my aunt to come get us. And if she did, he would not bother us again. She could continue to raise us through the rest of our childhood. And he was true to his word. He did not ask for us back. And so that's my story. My abuse started at 7. And here's the part I don't often talk about. And your audience is going to be one of the first to hear it. Is that in my junior year, my dad said, we'll come down and spend the summer. So the abuse did continue the summer between my junior and senior year. And then I guess when I went back my senior year, before I was off to college, he tried it, but I had a boyfriend at that time, and I just told him, I no longer want to do that. And surprisingly, he just said, okay. And I wish I had known it was that easy before, but you don't. You don't.
You don't?
No, you don't. And I remember sharing it with my sister. Well, she asked me the question. She said, well, and I don't even know what it made her think about it, but just came out of the blue. Well, Peggy, remember when we used to go down to see Daddy during the summer? Did the relationship continue? And I answered truthfully, yes, it did. And she said, but you were older then. And then I got immediately defensive, and because I felt such shame, because I was older, but he was still my father. He was still, and I was still groomed to keep the secret, the grooming process. And so but yes, I was older, but I was still, I suppose, the Stockholm syndrome, for lack of a better term, or one I don't know about yet. But that affinity for your abuser. So, but yes, it did continue. So, and that has been a very shameful part, a shameful thing that even after sharing my story of the incest, that was something that I held back. And now I am sharing that to be free of that too, because I think anything that we keep secrets breed sickness. And I just want to be free of all of it. I mean, I didn't seduce him. He seduced me. He was my father. He was supposed to be my protector. And there is that balance of power that parents have over their children, or bosses have over their employees, or whatever. So, yes. So, and then very quickly, I went to college.
At all, we have plenty of time. You can take as long as you want.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sure.
So I spent a lot of time when I was with my dad from 7 to 12 reading. So I read a lot, and I was pretty bright, and I did well in school. And I came, and when I got here to Michigan, where I am now, I found that I could not sleep at night. And I would come home from school, take a nap, and stay up for the rest of the night doing homework or whatever. And my parents were very angry about that, because they said, well, we have to get up early to go to work. But for some reason, I could not sleep at night. And later I found out it was because I never felt safe at night. But that was during treatment and some inner work that these things came up. So, but I did well in school, and then I went to college. But my parents used to love to entertain during the holidays, and there was always alcohol, and they didn't drink a lot, but they had alcohol, for the occasion. And I found myself very early on drinking, and and I would always drink, even at 12 years old or 13 years old or 16 years old. I would drink and not stop until I was sloppy drunk. And so, and of course, well, not of course, but at an early age, I was mature. My body was mature. I started my menstruation the summer before my 10th birthday. And I had started to gain weight, and you know that when the fat becomes to a certain percentage of the body weight or whatever, that's when your period starts. So mine started early because I started to use food to soothe the pain. And I developed breast and things like that. So I gained a lot of weight. So my first addiction was food, just stuffing the pain. My second one was alcohol. And then when I went off to college, my sophomore year, I think I started smoking weed. And then of course, the love of my life, the guy that I ended my incestuous relationship with my father for, my addiction to him, that extreme codependency that we feel. And I derailed my college career because of it. And he happened to be a heroin addict. So, and then just that feeling of always needing to be in an altered state, either stuffed to the gills, or drunk, or high. And after I finally graduated from college, because I fell in love and I got kicked out of school, they failed to enroll. So I spent a few years just, working jobs and whatever. And I decided I wanted to go back for my degree. So in 1981, when I graduated, I went back to live with my father to say, hey, I wanted him to apologize.
Yeah.
No, well, no. That wasn't it. I just wanted to go. Oh, he had gotten sick. That's what it was. So out of all that, I still did love my father, because he was a very charming, loving man. I loved him. And I felt the need to go back and take care of him. And then I went down there and stayed 3 years, and I don't know, some kind of way I got mad at him, and then I moved back up here. And I entered into another toxic relationship. I had a really good job, and I allowed my relationship with that guy to get me fired from that job. And I did some things, some kiting checks or whatever to get money for him. Things I would never do for myself.
Mhm.
But because of his influence, I did it. And then I had all these bad checks out there, and each check was one count. So, and then I had them in a few cities because, the boundaries.
Yeah.
So I was looking at probably no time, but I had never had any trouble with the law, so I had no way of knowing what was going. So then I fled back to Florida to get away from the legal consequences here. And then that's when he was with a woman that was only 10 years my senior. So she was young. Well, yeah, she was young. She's about almost 40 years. She was 37 years younger than he was.
Mm-hmm.
So an adult sort of pedophilic relationship. So, but she was using crack cocaine, which she introduced me to, because I came down with a job, with money, with possessions. So she saw a way to use me to fund her drug addiction. And I did for a while. So I got involved in crack cocaine, which is a devastating drug. Because unlike alcohol, which you pass out, or, marijuana, you eat and then you pass out.
Mm-hmm.
But crack cocaine is one of those, it's a stimulant. So you just run and run.
Ongoing.
And yeah, you chase it. And I went from 310 pounds to probably about 175 pounds in less than a year. Now I wish I had kept that weight off. That's the only part of the addiction that was positive, right? So I went into treatment, and it was a Christian one, very rigid. And I was sober, but I was white knuckling it. And I remember, and I had a wonderful church family that were very supportive. And I remember going to a retreat, because when I first got out, I got an apartment, a beautiful little cute little bedroom apartment, but I lived kitty corner to the store. And I remember one day going to the store, and I bought cookies, I bought ice cream, I bought pies, I bought just sugar and fattening stuff. And I remember walking home feeling just like I had left the dope house.
Yeah.
Because that food was my drug. And then I went home and I ate it. But I remember going to a retreat, and although I was sober, I was still in so much pain. I was hurting so bad. And I remember at the retreat, the leader said, "Come to the altar and lay your burdens at the feet of the Father." And I did. And I said, "God, I am sober, but I am miserable. And I know that you have more for me. I know you want more for me, because the fruit of your spirit is joy, and it's self-control, and all the other fruit of the spirit." So I don't even remember when that was, but shortly after that, it was Hurricane Andrew, because I was in Florida, and it was the first Category 5 hurricane in years, and it just wreaked havoc with the whole South Florida area. And my place was severely damaged. And and my friends, they were all my support system. They were all dealing with their own stuff, because they were basically homeless too, and they were scrambling to take care of themselves. And I felt abandoned. Now, I couldn't name it at the time. I hadn't done the work to be able to name the feelings, except I felt a negative feeling. So I ended up moving because there was no place to go in my immediate area because so much of the area was destroyed. So I had to move back closer to where I was drugging. And I remember, sounds sober all this time. And I remember a friend of one of the guys I used to drug with, and he was kind of sweet on me, and I really liked him too. And he saw me and he said, oh, you know, but the thing of it is I'd seen him a few times before, and I would never let him know where I lived because I knew how the scenario was going to go. He was eventually going to bring drugs to my house.
Yeah.
And so I saw him and he said, oh, I want to come see your dad. That was his guys, but you know, I knew what he was up to. And he did come. And as a matter of fact, I ended up living very close to where he was working. He was a used car salesman, and he made quite a lot of money because he was very good at it. And I remember he came to see my dad the first time, and he said, are you smoking? No. Are you drinking? No. I wasn't smoking cigarettes or smoking cocaine or doing alcohol. I was doing nothing. And he said, oh, wow. But so he didn't do anything that day. But I remember one day he came to my house on his lunch hour and he brought drugs. And then I was in such a terrible, terrible emotional state because I was still miserable. My support system was gone. Oh, and what I neglected to say, then my father started to expose himself to me because I had asked him to live with me because
he was sick.
And I thought, naively, foolishly, that because he could no longer abuse me physically, that was all it is, because I didn't understand the different types of abuse.
Yes.
And it's just not the physical part. There's the psychological part. There's the verbal part, all of that. So I didn't understand all that at the time. And so what he would do, he would come out of the bathroom and accidentally expose himself, things like that. And then there was one, and then even actually, so I guess before that, so the guy, he brought drugs to my house, we got high, and then I was off and running again. And then of course, you know, well, maybe you do or maybe you don't. But in that lifestyle, you know, you end up just with a lot of people just for the companionship, just for the sex, to feel better. So I started.
Yeah.
So I was with several different partners, and then my dad saw that and he propositioned me. He said he would pay me to sleep with him. And then I was, you know, it's like, oh my God, whatever is wrong with you? So, but anyway, you know, I didn't do it, but I didn't understand that I wasn't free.
That's right.
From his abuse, and that I would never be free from his abuse. And then I remember I just was so, and I accepted the Lord when I was like 5 years old. And I believe God had his hand on me all that time, especially in my crack cocaine addiction, because I was in some very, very dangerous situations where I just saw the hand of God protect me. And I remember, but I was just so tired because I had a long period of sobriety, and it's, you know, I was miserable. But when you add that misery with the misery of drug abuse, it was just unbearable. And I was again crying out to the Lord for something, and God can just use anything. And I remember I was selling all my possessions to get drug money, but I was also going to move out of the house that I had rented because I didn't know where I was going, but I was going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And And the guy who, somebody decided they wanted to buy my refrigerator. And the guy who came to pick it up, he had just come out of a Christian ministry called Faith Farm Ministries. And he said, well, you know, Peggy, they have a women's program. And I said, oh, okay. So, of course, I got the money for the refrigerator and smoked it up. but I did not forget what he told me. And so a few days later, I called, and one of the first questions they asked me was, were you sexually abused? And I said, yes. And they said, oh, well, we can help you. We specialize in women who have been sexually abused. And I said, oh, thank you, God. And then I went for the interview, and they wanted me to stay, but I said, no, I need to go back, because my house was a wreck that I had rented, and I wanted to honor the person who had rented me the house, because it was a friend's mother. So I didn't want to leave it all, screwed up. So I said, I'll come back in a week. And I did go back in a week, and I drugged a little bit, but there was really no pleasure in that, because first of all, your first high is the best high. But I mean, I'm not saying you don't get high, but you are
the same though. It's never the same.
It's never the same.
It's
never the same.
A repeatable occasion, I've learned.
Exactly.
Unmatchable. Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. So I spent that week, getting high. And I remember I took my last $10. I told somebody something and got $10, and I went and bought a rock. And then I said, well, this is my last rock, win, lose, or draw. I am done. It was the night before I was supposed to go. And I had arranged with somebody to take me. And so it wasn't that pleasurable. And I remember after I did that, I remember I was on my way. I don't know. I was going out for something. Maybe I was going to buy drugs. Maybe I wasn't. I can't remember why. But I remember seeing one of my lovers. But when I went to the other drug program, I didn't see him anymore because he was still drugging. But as it happened, and as the devil would want it, I saw him walking on the side of the street on my way home. And I just passed on by, because I had made up in my mind that I was done and I was going to go to enter treatment. And I did. And that was a Thursday, March 18th of 1993. So my 30th anniversary is coming up in a couple of months. And God has been so good to me, Kristin. It hasn't always been easy, but well, you know how it is. Your worst day sober, what is it? Your worst day sober is better than your best day high, or whatever.
Your worst day sober is still better than your best day using.
That's it. So I know I screwed it up, but
no, you didn't. You're on the right track. You're on the right track.
But yes, but no matter how bad it gets for me, and I've had a lot of disappointments. I've had a lot of trials and tribulations, but I always remember that, especially with crack cocaine, one is too many and 1,000 is not enough. And I've always thought, where's this going to lead? Because when I first moved to Florida, I had money, I had clothes, lovely clothes, designer clothes, all of that. And I mean, I just sold everything. And I couldn't work because, I had jobs, but hey, you stay up all night, you go to work, you do that 2 or 3 days, then, you can no longer work. So I had just totally destroyed my life. So I just knew that if I ever used again, where it was going to lead. And I didn't want that, because as bad as my life was, it was infinitely better. And I was enjoying life. So that is how I started on this journey 30 years ago. And God was so gracious to me. And just one quick more thing, and then we can have our conversation.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear as much as you want to share. I'm available for
I
it.
remember feeling so defeated when I went into treatment the second time. And I cried every day for a month. And I mean, just every day, I just so defeated. And I remember lying in bed one night, and God reminded me that, Peggy, this is the answer to your prayer. Remember at the altar when you begged me for healing? This is that.
Yeah.
And it was. And it was. So I stayed there actually 3 years, 1 year in the program. Well, I had done so well because I had 3 years of sobriety, and I had been through another program. And in 6 months, they said, well, Peggy, you're ready to graduate. No, I'm not. I relapsed once. I'm not ready. I want to stay. And so I did the 4 year. It was a 1 year program, and I stayed. And then I stayed 2 more years to work with the women who came after me, to help mentor them and work with them and let them know that through doing the hard work and through the love of the Lord, it's possible to have a life and to go from that trauma to that triumph. And it's just been a wonderful life. Like I said, not without its challenges, but it's been very rewarding. And I've just seen God just work so many miracles in my life. So that's my story, basically, in a nutshell.
Oh, I'm so honored to hear your story, Peggy. As you were talking, I was taking little notes, and there were so many parts where you very eloquently described like how you felt in that moment or what your train of thought was. And I felt like I can totally relate to thinking that or feeling that or wondering that or experimenting with that. Like, I know that so many women have walked in similar shoes that you and I have. And then from a recovery standpoint, hearing that you're going to be 30 years in March,
Yes.
I'm so inspired by hearing that and by knowing you and knowing someone who's stayed well and kept growing on such a long journey. I'm so inspired by you.
Well, thank you, Kristin. I'm inspired by you because I know that you've been well, compared to 30 years, you're
I'm
a
still a
little
toddler.
you're a little newer in your journey, but it's so fabulous. And I was listening to one of your podcasts, and I really enjoyed that. And you have some very interesting takes on some things. But and one of the things you said, I don't know, I don't want to derail
No, go for
your
it.
interview.
No, we're visiting. Go for it. I'd love to hear it.
Well, the program, and you talked about, the one I would listen to was about the 12 steps. So you were talking about the different types of healing modalities, and you got around to the 12 steps. And I did do a 12-step program, but I did the Christian version. I didn't do it in the rooms because my reluctance for that, or I don't know if it's an aversion, but I didn't want to stand up and continue to claim that my name is Peggy and I'm an addict. No. Yes, I was. But I no longer claim that. And I did my steps, and you were talking about step 4, about how that can derail some people. So I was kind of thinking about that, and I meant to do some research on step 4, but I got busy. And that you go back and you talk about your sexual partners and that sort of thing. So I don't remember that part. I think they cut that out in the Christian in the Christian version.
They're like, we're not going to talk about that here.
I don't remember that part, but I think you're absolutely right. That we don't necessarily, because in our case, when we were abused, we had no responsibility in that. And to go back and say, well, what was your responsibility? Oh, well, I was 7 and maybe I walked around in my panties. I mean, or I don't know, whatever else you may have done when you were 7 years old to make a man feel sexual desire towards you. There's nothing that you could have done to deserve that or arouse that. It's that the sickness in the individual's mind. So if that is a part of step 4, then I totally agree with you.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. It's something that let me put it this way. It's a hill I'm willing to put my life and my career on, because as much as I admire and respect and appreciate what 12-step programs have done over the past almost 100 years.
Right.
My sobriety journey started also there. And the more I learn about what we know now about how the brain reacts to trauma that they didn't know in the 30s.
Right.
So my concern about step 4 isn't a criticism necessarily of the program or the people.
Right.
It's an awareness. I want awareness around step 4.
Right.
For women and survivors, men and women like us.
Correct.
Because what I learned in the Blue Book, the original, I ended up doing all 12 steps through a book similar to yours. It was called The Woman's Way, and it was much more gentle, much more it kind of slid over all of that, which I appreciated, because my sponsor knew that I was a sexual assault survivor, and she said, there's no way I'm taking you through the big book, because you'll bolt, you'll be out of here like that. And I'm so grateful for her that she chose that fork in the road, because she's 100% right. So after I finished the 12 steps, we were to start studying the big book. And I was doing some reading I taught at the time, or not taught, I chaired an adult children of alcoholics book at the time. And I was also doing a trauma-informed certification at the time. So I was learning a lot about language, different psychological reasons why we really need to be careful bringing up sexual trauma in settings that aren't necessarily safe.
Right.
And in my opinion, an addict with another addict, even if it's her or his sponsor, is not the safest space to do that without the guidance of therapy or some kind of trauma-informed practice. So when I learned about some of the trauma being triggered in clients that I had, in myself, in friends that I was in the program with, I really focused on what are we doing here? And that's when I started to study step 4 in the big book. What is so difficult for me to accept or even acknowledge at this point
Hmm.
is any survivor of sexual assault having to list all of the names of people that they've been intimate with.
Well, if you could remember.
And bingo, I mean, there's that. There's
Well,
that.
I'll put it this way, even if I could remember, because I'm thinking, I remember some guys and I remember the face. Well, what was their name?
Yeah.
I don't have a
I
clue.
feel like it's so demeaning
Yes.
and demoralizing. And in my opinion, when we take someone, number one, who's a survivor, number two, who is using addiction to cope with their trauma, and we demoralize them further, that's some darn dangerous ground to be tiptoeing on. Like, that's very, very, very reckless. And when I continued to study step 4, after that demoralizing exercise, was your role in it. And if you've been an addict, like I have, like you have, former addicts, it's rather unclear what our role is, or
Right.
what was sexual assault and what wasn't, or what was fawning behavior or fight, flight, or freeze behavior. When were we frozen when otherwise we would have said no? That is so triggering and frankly just downright reckless. So
Well, yes.
yeah, I've kind of ruffled the 12-step community and I'm aware of it. And it is not out of lack of respect for the program. It is to demand awareness that something changes to hold safely our sisters and brothers that are sexual assault survivors.
Well, absolutely. And even with that, and I agree, our responsibility, um, but as you may know, but I don't know about you, but I haven't been abused at my abuse started at 7. The My earliest relationship, my dearest relationship was with a man who was supposedly my protector and all of that, my father. So I equated affection with sex.
Yes.
And because I didn't know how to separate the two. And I'll even tell you, um, I had 2 friends who, through high school, and they were cute and they thought I was cute and they wanted to sleep with me. But those were the 2 relationships that I protected because they were like brothers. But a lot of my other male relationships that I had, when I felt affection for a guy, I felt the need for it to be sexual. And I know that, and I was thinking about this because I know, we think about things that affect us and things, and I'm even trying to figure out if promiscuity is should be used in terms of um for an abuser. I kind of like the term, maybe it's a euphemism, but
Yes.
hypersexual,
Yes.
because we it's something in us that it's not a moral failure. It's an extreme and need to feel love and and to express that love in the way you know how. Now, if you learn to be a if you're training to be a chef, and they say you make roux this way, you put some flour in it and you use a little oil and whatever, and then you whip it up and then you add your liquid. Well, then that's the way you've been taught to do it. And then maybe you're making some other kind of gravy and it doesn't require that, but you don't know that. And so when your earliest memories of loving intimate relationships, not necessarily sexual, but loving affectionate relationships are sexual. So from 7 years old, my life turned sexual. And I came to equate that with sex. So I prefer the term hypersexuality. Did I have several sexual relationships? Yes, I did. But I also had, and I probably would have had a lot more, but several of my relationships, my first relationship was 8 years. My last one was 19 years. So I was in a committed relationship for a lot of that time. But in between, I had a few more relationships. And I remember when I was in college, I had a guy that I liked. He was African. And I had calculus, and he was just so brilliant. And I asked him to tutor me. So I remember him coming to my apartment, and I had a room that was set up like a sitting room, and we were sitting on the couch, and I felt affection for him. And then he was training me, I mean, tutoring me. And I remember coming on to him, and poor guy, he didn't know what hit him. And we ended up having sex, but it ruined the relationship. I mean, he could no longer tutor me. And it wasn't like I loved him like that. I mean, I loved him platonically, but I was so confused emotionally that I confused emotion and affection with sex. I mean, it was like a package. That affection means sex, because my dad's always said, well, if you love me,
you'll do this.
Yes. If you love me and if I love you, how can it be wrong?
Yeah.
Well, my little 7-year-old brain knew that was definitely wrong. So I'm twisted up in the head about affection, sex. Where does it go? And back to your point is, so even that, when we're feeling so low, so down, so unlovable, and then we're getting this affection, and then the person says, well, okay, well, let's sleep together. And okay. So I guess I kind of brought that up just as an aside. I really don't like the term promiscuity, because I guess that's really what it is, but it's deeper than that. It's more complicated than that. It's like, it's not necessarily the need for sex, it's the need for intimacy, it's the need to feel loved, it's the need to feel worthy, it's the need to feel everything. And if all you know how to express that and to receive that is in the bed, then that's where you'll go to get it. So I prefer the term hypersexuality, if we could throw stuff out there that we want to change the narrative, and you know what I'm saying, and how sexual abuse survivors, incest survivors, are viewed. Well, yeah, it makes you promiscuous. Well, yeah, you do have a lot of sexual partners, but, and I know the exact term because I kind of looked it up, and I say, well, yeah, I guess that does fit literally. But emotionally and psychologically, it does not take an account of all that. Yeah, you have a lot of sexual partners, but why? It's not some moral failing. It's just a deep-seated need to feel loved and wanted.
I agree implicitly. I have even one of my best friends is also a survivor, and she and I were talking about how lately on social media it's become a thing where the next generation, so like millennials, like 30s ish generation under me, is getting kind of hung up on what's called body count. And they're like asking their dating partners, so what's your number? And getting
Oh,
real hung up on this. And I've noticed this also when people do step 12 or step 4 of the 12-step program, because they have to list them all. So clearly they see their number. And to me, not only is it degrading, I feel like with a number, almost always there is a value.
yes.
And if someone has a low number, a low body count, does that make them more of a valuable human than I am? If my
Right.
number is higher than them? So I put a lot of thought into it, especially since I'm new to the dating world, which let me tell you, Peggy, whew, dating at 46 is a adventure.
Tell me about it. Well, all I have to say about that is be careful. Well, no, not careful. Be wise.
Be wise. I love
And and I think that because I was about 43, 44, 45 when I got into my last relationship, and it did last 19 years, but he was a Christian, I was a Christian, and I thought, oh, we were, two Christians together. I thought we had the same values, but we really didn't. Our values were so different, even though we were both Christians. And so I think that's an important part of relationships, in really studying what your underlying values are. I mean, that's just from a more mature woman.
I
Um,
appreciate it. I think aligning with values with someone is more important. Actually, I think it's the values to me, and a commitment to personal growth and spiritual growth trump everything else.
yes,
How
yes,
much
because
money you make, how tall you are, how good looking you are. None of that will matter to me if you're not committed to spiritual and personal growth, or our values don't align.
and that was the key. And even then, even though I was sober and I was still beginning on my journey, I was somewhat misled because of the Christian doctrine in terms of evenly yoked Christian to Christian, yes, but I neglected to um, consider how important our life values were. Well, what do you want in life? Where do you want to go? Because I was quite ambitious and I wanted a lot of things in my life, not just the material things, but growth things. And I wanted to travel. I love to entertain. There were so many things. And he was sort of like an introvert. He didn't like to be around people. He wasn't social. And just even that, it just created a lot of friction in our lives. So yes, totally. So you're way ahead of the game from where I was. I wish I had understood that and had more serious conversations. But then even then, you know, this healing is a journey. So I was sober. I had gotten a lot of freedom, but I was probably right about where you are, 3-4 years into my sobriety, and hadn't totally exactly found out who I was. And here I was trying to partner with somebody else. And that's why now one of the things I think about the steps is that no intimate relationships for the first year. I really think that's good.
Yes.
And it was 3 years for me, and I still didn't get it right, but that's okay. You live and you learn.
How
So
you
but
learn.
it's
That's the journey. That's the adventure of the journey, Peggy.
it certainly is, Kristen. I'm telling you. But I mean, it is what it is, and I learned a lot from that. Oh, and here's an interesting story about how just an interesting story. I remember, and this was something when because of the hypersexuality in my addiction, I made the decision not to live with anybody or have sex until I married. And then I started dating my ex, and I remember his friend called me, and he relapsed because we met at the place where we were both stayed on to work and mentor other people. And I was living my life, I was working and whatever, and he relapsed. And I remember his friend calling me saying, "Oh, he's in bad shape. He was in some sleep bag motel." And so I went to go see about him, and he didn't have any place to stay. So he wanted me, somehow it came around to him living with me. And I'm like, well, and I told myself that I didn't want to do that, but, and I made that promise to God, but I broke that promise to have him come live with me anyway. And to myself and to God, because I really didn't want to do that. But I did. And I remember very early on in our relationship, my aunt died. I was living in Florida at the time. My aunt died here in Michigan. And I needed to come home right away to be with my family. And I left in my car, and I flew out of Fort Lauderdale. I was living in West Palm Beach, 50, 60, maybe 70 miles or whatever. Left in my car. He dropped me off at the airport, was supposed to pick me at Friday night. He was supposed to pick me back up Sunday night. Sunday night, I flew back in. Where are you? Where are you? I couldn't reach him. He has my car. And then I flew back in, late. And I remember I had about $100 in cash. So this was in early 90s. So, cash and stuff like that wasn't so readily available like it is. You can't just do it on the app. Yeah. So I just had cash. I had about $100 cash. And I asked the cab driver, I said, "Look, I only have $100. Will you take me home for $100? And he said, "I got to run the meter, so I don't know." So I said, "Okay." Well, I called a girlfriend of mine. It's 12 o'clock at night. So she comes out to pick me and bring me home. But when I get home, everything I own of value in my apartment is gone. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And at that particular time, I was like, oh my God. So I was so distraught. And I had stopped smoking. I hadn't smoked in about 6 years. But I felt so much like relapsing that I went to the store and bought a pack of cigarettes. So I didn't even know where to get drugs, because I knew it was all around me, and I could have driven around within a mile and found 2 or 3 drug holes. But I didn't know, and I didn't want to do that. So I just went and got some cigarettes. So that led me back into smoking. But here's the point I'm trying to make. I remember when he finally came home, and I was so through with him. I didn't want to see him. I wanted nothing to do with him. And then he came in, and I was so angry. And I lit into him, and he said to me, and I wanted him out. He said to me, but before I could say it, he said, "Okay, well, I'll just leave." And I can't tell you, when he said that to me, something within my chest it almost ripped my heart out. It ripped my chest out. And then I'm saying, "Oh, you don't have to leave." And then that's here. But here's like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yes.
You want what the hell is wrong with you? Yeah. But I didn't understand it. It was that feeling of abandonment. It was that feeling of loss. And throughout the years, I have come to be able to really know what I'm feeling and be able to name it. When I'm feeling rejected, when I'm feeling abandoned, when I'm feeling disrespected, when I'm feeling taken advantage of, with all those things that I just felt and reacted to, now I can process what those feelings are and act appropriately. I don't need to pick up a drink or eat a bag of potato chips and a bag of cookies, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's weird, but I guess I said that to say, even in healing, there are times um when when you still screw it up, but it's okay. It's
Oh,
okay,
I for sure screwed up a couple of things. I also waited to start dating until I was further along in my sobriety. But Peggy, I am so well attuned to my trauma showing up when I'm out in the dating world. Just like you described, someone saying, "Oh, we don't really align," or I'm not really getting feelings for you. Like, to me, that shows up as like abandonment or disapproval.
Mhm.
And so this past year, I've been doing a lot of work, therapy, coaching, reading, learning about how to not attach to other human beings in an anxious manner or in
Right,
a way that is anything other than I am a complete woman and you're a complete person.
right.
And here we are, not you complete me. Get over here. Don't go anywhere.
I know that's right. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully you enhance me, but I mean, I'm complete all by myself.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
That's
you enhance my life. Is
yeah,
really what it is. That's what I want. I want an enhancement, not a completion, because I am enough. I can support myself.
right.
I love myself. I love my alone time. All of that. So yes, but it can kind of sneak up on you a little bit every now
It
and then,
can. I've caught myself. I like the analogy of talking about self-fulfillment and self-love. I was going to save this for a different podcast, but I'm going to use it with you since we're talking about it.
Okay.
My analogy, I view myself as I show up in the world as a cupcake,
Mhm. Oh, okay.
and the cupcake has frosting.
Right.
It's complete. It's a cake, frosting. It shows up in the world. My person that I'm dating or people that I am interested in dating, they're just the sprinkles.
Right.
If they take their sprinkles, I'm still a cupcake.
Exactly.
I'm still completely baked with frosting. I can be eaten with or without sprinkles. Thank you very much. So if they
Exactly.
aren't aligning with my values and my needs and my desires and my goals, they can take their sprinkles and I'm still okay. Do I enjoy having sprinkles? Absolutely. Who doesn't?
Exactly.
However, I do not, I am not seen as less valuable for not having sprinkles.
Absolutely.
Whereas before this type of growth and therapy and healing, I would be like, "Oh, you don't you don't like my frosting? Let me make a different color frosting.
Yes.
Oh, you don't like my short hair? I'll grow it longer. Oh, you think I need to wear a push-up bra? Fine, I'll wear one all day, every day." Like, that's how I was, and that is a product of my sexual trauma, which I didn't know. I just thought I was a chameleon and I was a really cool chick that could be anything you wanted me to be. And I really
Oh, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
was I was making myself in so many pieces. I didn't know who the hell I was.
I know exactly what you mean because I went through that game with my ex. Okay, well, you don't like that, I won't do that. I get holidays. He would ruin every holiday. And I remember he always had one specific complaint about something I did. I didn't start cooking soon enough, or this or that or the other. So this holiday, whatever he fussed about, I would fix that. Then the next holiday, it was something else.
Yep.
And then I would fix that, and on and on and on. And then after 5 or 10 times, I'm like, okay, it's not me. It's not me. And there's nothing I can do, because he will always find something. It's in him. And so as I started to process that, I just started to understand it's really not me. I'm okay. I'm okay. And I mean, when you're in a relationship, sometimes there are valid things that need addressed, that need to be addressed. But you know, when you start to address things, and then it just ends up being everything, and the person cannot be satisfied, then no, it's not you. And then I think another thing is, you have to even assess the validity of their complaint.
That's right.
You know, is this a valid complaint? Is this a valid concern? Am I disrespecting this person? I remember I was in class, and some of my classmates were male, and we had groups. We were doing group projects, and I had a male on my group project, and we only met once or twice a week. So we would call each other during the week to discuss our projects. Why is this man calling you? Well, he's my classmate. We're working on a project. I mean, you know, foolishness like that. So I could go on and on and on. And then at some point, it's like, well, I need to be out of this relationship. And I mean, I stayed in it probably a lot longer than I should have, but only because I understood who God created him to be. And I was hoping that that would happen. But then even I realized that I'm not God, and I don't need to be God in his life. So we ended up separating. We're great friends. We were friends before we started dating, and now we're great friends again. And then that part was, we tried to be lovers and, you know, make a lifelong of it. But, you know, we're both good people.
Yep.
He's a good man. I'm a good woman. We just weren't good for each other. And at some point I outgrew him, because he was not willing to grow with me.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, because people come together at different points in their lives, but if you are but a part of life is continued growth. And if you aren't growing together, and not necessarily quite at the same pace, lockstep like that, but if they can't celebrate your growth and come along at their pace with their growth, then it's a doomed relationship anyway. And I found that out, you know. So at my age, I don't think my love life is over. I'm not eager necessarily to be in another relationship, because I'm very content by myself. So I'm not closing the door on that, but nor am I desperate, because I think we all have some longings to be loved. We were created to be in relationship. So there's that. But, you know, it's nothing I'm desperate for, or so, but I haven't closed the door on it. And I think that when you're calm and at peace, then you create the environment to invite things in, rather than going out, you know, searching desperately for something. So I'll let God to decide, you know, if he has a man somewhere in store for me.
I heard something that when I heard it, I was like, yep, give me that. I want that for me. And what it said is, so many of us are trying to find love when we should be love.
Oh, I love that.
I love it too. So as I move throughout my world and dipping my toe in the dating world, which is so bizarre, especially
I can imagine,
especially as a sober lady. But as I move throughout the world and the dating world, I'm still healing. I still have some trauma wounds that I'm working on. And although I've come a really long way, I want to honor them. And I want to honor still embodying my body and taking my health back and all of the things that I've been working on. So I'm not quick to jump into anything. And at the same time, I enjoy being a cupcake with or without sprinkles.
Absolutely. Well, if for me, you're perfect without sprinkles because I don't like sprinkles. So
I love it.
you're absolutely perfect.
Thank you, Peggy. Well, I have to tell you, people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And from the very first time you and I talked, I felt like I want this woman in my corner in my life for a lifetime. I am so
Likewise.
grateful our paths went like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I felt the exact same way. And I remember, my Kristin with an I.
Yep. Oh, thank you for doing this work with me, Peggy.
Absolutely. It is certainly my pleasure. And I just hope, Kristin, this is the beginning of a very, very long friendship and a partnership, and we can support each other throughout our endeavors and things like that. Oh, and I saw that you are doing a certification. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you.
I'm gonna reach out to you to learn more about that because it may be something I'm interested in. So, but definitely we'll be keeping in touch. And thank you for this honor and this privilege to be on Last Call with Kristin. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you for being so willing and transparent and authentic.
My pleasure. Only way to be. I want to normalize talking about our abuse
Yes.
because we've been silent too long.
That's
And
right.
if this is my soapbox, it's our silence only emboldens the perpetrators so that they can continue in their abuse. So we need to speak up and let others who are in similar situations know that it's okay to speak up. As a matter of fact, hopefully they'll consider it as their responsibility to do so as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Peggy.
you so much, my darling.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
All right. Thank you, Kristin.
Thank you. Bye
All
for
right.
now.
Bye-bye.